純だらけの世界をその手で打ち放て
Hello and welcome to Unhelpful Media. I'm your host, Gladfly, and today we will be reviewing the second season of Sword Art Online 2. Before we begin, first I have to warn you that I will be spoiling both seasons of Sword Art Online, right down to the last episode that aired a couple weeks ago. If you want a non-spoiler summary of my thoughts, I would have to say if you haven't watched SAO, well, don't. But if you watched the first season, definitely watch the second. Though this is a super simplified version of what I have to say about SAO, which is simply impossible to say without spoiling the series as a whole, so consider yourself warned. I've had a complicated relationship with Sword Art Online since its debut back in 2012. Over the course of the first season of SAO, I transitioned from a fanatic to a hater. The second season helped me find a sort of peace with the series that eventually transitioned into a general fondness for it. The series is based on the light novels by Reki Kawahara, and were adapted first into a manga and then into the anime that is the subject of this review. The series is produced by A1 Pictures and directed by Tomohiko Ito. The second season of Sword Art Online consists of 3 arcs. The first 12 episodes make up the Gun Gale Online arc, while the last 12 episodes are split into the Caliber arc and the Mother Rosario arc. A lot of the hate that was generated for the second half of the first season of SAO came from the transition from the world of Ankrid in the first half to Alfheim Online in the second. The purpose of transitioning the world in the series is to give the author the ability to remake SAO and have it tell a different story every season. For instance, Gun Gale Online is a cyberpunk murder mystery, while the second half, Mother's Rosario, is a slice of life. The Alfheim Online arc was at once so different and yet just similar enough to really anger fans of the original world of SAO. I mean, that's not to say that Alfheim Online didn't have plenty of other problems besides this anyways, but yeah. Gun Gale Online fully realizes the possibilities of the narrative setup by being so different from SAO but still harkening back to some of the best episodes such as Murder Within the Walls. The main setup is that a murderer from the death game that Kirito participated in previously has moved to a cyberpunk RPG game called Gun Gale Online and has begun to murder people within the game. Kirito is called upon by the government officials to enter the game and track down the murderer. He is joined in this quest by Sinon, a traumatized young woman who is one of the best players in the new game. Thus, the main plot arc of GGO is to figure out how is the murderer killing his victims and who he is. This excellently straightforward narrative element is paired with a surprisingly excellent drama of Sinon overcoming her PTSD from killing a man in self-defense when she was a child. Sinon uses the digital world to cope by immersing herself in a world filled with guns, even though outside of the virtual world she can't see a gun without passing out and throwing up. Another excellent aspect of her character and her addition to the story is that she's not presented as a possible love interest for Kirito, unlike all the other women that have shown up thus far. That's not to say that they don't have the obligatory fan service, awkward misunderstandings, and sexualized situations, but her character seems to suggest that her interests solely lie in her desire to study Kirito to understand how he overcame his PTSD. I know it seems like I'm splitting hairs here, but the whole thing just feels a lot better than Sugu's love triangle that never was in the previous season. It's just better. With all that said, GGO has one massive flaw. It just is way too bloody long. The whole mystery is so stretched out that more than half of the 12 episodes are given over to almost totally unnecessary filler episodes. I mean, it's amazing once it gets there, but it simply takes too bloody long. There was too many instances in the season where I almost gave up on it altogether because I was so bored to tears, with too many talking heads and too much overly clunky exposition. The second half of the season begins with the Caliber arc, which follows the whole SAO gang as they go on an adventure for loot. Many have suggested this arc is simply to provide a fun little emotional barrier between the seriousness of GGO and the Mother's Rosario arc, but I simply can't accept this. One of the biggest problems with the series is it just seems to be marking time, and Caliber is the worst in terms of this. It's nice to see the full cast, but in terms of enjoyable fan service, it just doesn't function as a proper harem due to Kirito's and Asuna's well-defined relationship. It provides neither the best action in the series or any stakes worth mentioning, as well as a total lack of any meaningful character development. Caliber is easily the worst part of the season. As bad as Caliber is, though, the following arc more than makes up for it. The final arc, Mother's Rosario, ditches Kirito as the main character in lieu of exploring Asuna's life after SAO. She meets and goes on an adventure with a young girl named Yuki and eventually joins the girls' guild called the Sleeping Knights. Mother's Rosario is really at its heart a character-driven story about Asuna and Yuki and how the two girls teach each other how to live. Asuna is shown to be unable to speak to her overbearing mother, who sees her as disabled after the events of the death game, as she is so far behind in her schooling. Yuki, on the other hand, while very cheerful, is unsure of what her life will mean. It is eventually revealed that Yuki and the other sleeping knights all have terminal illnesses and only have a few months to live. Yuki lives continuously within the digital world to avoid the pain of her illness that it causes her real body. Yuki teaches Asuna how to have strength in the real world, and Asuna in turn shows Yuki that she mattered in the world she lived in. I can give no higher praise to this arc than to say that it makes all of Sword Art Online's ups and downs as a series worth it. And furthermore, of all the characters in the series, Yuki will most likely be the one I remember the longest, despite her late arrival. Judging SAO is difficult. Its most defining characteristics is its inconsistency as a series, which is not simply the product of the multiple world narrative device, but rather a deeper-rooted issue in the source material. It has a thoughtful discourse about PTSD one minute, only to follow it up with empty fan service the next. If I'm to be totally and completely objective, then I would probably say SAO on the whole may be bad. But at the same time, after Mother's Rosario, and especially after watching Yuki die, I'm glad that SAO has been a part of my life. Thus, back to my original thrust, are the 2 seasons of SAO good? Well, honestly, it has some amazing moments and some really shitty moments. But that said, if you have watched the first season, you definitely need to watch the second, as it did a lot to help me come to terms with the animosity the end of the first season caused in me. And furthermore, watching Yuki's Viking funeral and watching the world of Alfheim Online come together to support her, it's a reward in itself. For Unhelpful Media, this has been Gladfly.